This is episode 7 of Digital Christianity: How to Live More Like a Human. In the previous episodes, we've heard testimonies and research that have helped us see how technology wars with our humanity. In future episodes, we'll get in depth on specific apps like TikTok, issues like addiction. But I want you to hear some people sharing firsthand experiences of how their technology began to harm themselves and others. Later in this episode, you'll hear about a resource from Crossway Books who's sponsoring this podcast and how this book can aid Christians with wisdom in this technological age. For now, I want you to hear again from Jen Pollock Michelle as she shares a sobering story about Dave Hollis, a former Disney executive and influencer who lost his humanity in many ways due to the insidious ways social media corrupts us. As Jen begins, you'll hear her share caution and sensitivity about this story, but Hollis's life is a cautionary tale for each of us.
Yeah, I want to be really sensitive in sharing that story because Dave Hollis died and he left behind an ex-wife and children. And so, I'm going to simply just sort of relay what I learned through a Wall Street Journal article about his death. And it happened to just sort of very providentially kind of come across my desk. I don't know if somebody sent it to me but just a little bit of background. Rachel Hollis wrote a book, like when I was really first starting to write publicly Christianity Today, 2011-ish, she wrote a book called Girl Wash Your Face. And it really was sort of published under the guise of this is a Christian book, but people had found it very problematic, because it was a little bit less of, here's what Jesus has done for you and here's the grace that's extended to you. But no, here's how you get up by, and wash your face, stop your complaining and get the work done, of your life. And I didn't read the book. So if I am, mischaracterizing it, then that's sort of my disclaimer on that. But what sadly happened is, the book was a blockbuster success. And we could certainly talk about that. I think it's a very appealing message on the one hand, you can change your life, you just need to make better decisions. You need to sort of take the bull by the horns, and be strong and courageous and, charge forward, into your change. And I think it is an appealing message. And this is why self-help books sell. I think what happened is that it's what you imagine, like the influencer before really the influencer, because we're really kind of pre-Instagram here, I think. But eventually, she gets on Instagram and her husband gets on Instagram and he quits his job as an executive at Disney. And the pressure is enormous. It's inordinate to not just live a life publicly, but really to perform a life publicly. And that's one of the things that I think is a really important thing to think about, is that you can't live your life on social media. You can't just broadcast what you're doing. There's a way in which it always becomes performative. But what's so insidious about it is it's a performativity of of authenticity. It's the gritty mess, but really it's not, because you've kind of curated, the content, and you've thought very deliberately about what you're wearing and where you are, in your house, and it falls apart, and eventually they divorce, and Dave, he kind of goes into rehab, he's got some addiction issues, and he gets back on social media and it just goes really, really badly. Mm-hmm. He's not doing well. And it's pretty obvious, I think. On the one hand, it's not obvious because he looks great, right? He's fit and he's tanned and he's, I don't know, whatever. But the things happen. There's an interaction, I think, with one of his children, and people just are like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? Get off of social media and go parent and be a real person." And he ends up dying of an overdose. And it's just such a sad and tragic story. I think in one way is, it is a very exaggerated story. I certainly wouldn't want to say like, just because you get on social media, like,
Yeah,
that's
this
your
is what's going to happen.
trajectory.
Yeah.
But you can see that this is just not the way that we are meant to live as human beings. We can't perform our lives. We can barely live our lives, much less perform them. I have a hard enough time just kind of like doing the day-to-day realities, much less having to do it in front of a camera. And so that's the story I chose to open with because I thought it just exemplified that principle, pretty perfectly. Tragically, I'm sorry to say.
As I heard Jen share Hollis's sobering story, I pointed out the fact that Rachel and Dave were adults who got caught up in the allures and chaos of the pressures from a performative life online. But what about teenagers who get sucked into this? Young hearts and minds that don't have the life experience to deal with these pressures. As Jen says, social media is the bleeding world of indiscreet self-disclosure. This young generation is growing up to see this indiscreet self-disclosure online as the way to truly live, but that's not the humanity Christianity calls us to. Before we talk more about the life we are called to live as Christians and the way we can strive to be fully human, let's hear from Sarah Zylstra again. We heard her share her own struggles with social media while she was in the midst of writing a book about it, as well as creating a podcast for the Gospel Coalition entitled Scrolling Alone. Hear her discuss life after social media, the changes she began to notice as she removed herself from this addiction and started living more like a human.
I noticed differences like in 4 areas of my life, which are basically all the areas. The first one is spiritually. I have noticed I can do better at my quiet times. I'm more disciplined in them and I can pay attention. I can read through a chapter of the Bible without getting distracted. I can pay better. I just feel like can pay better attention to the Lord during the day because in my quiet moments, I can either plan or think ahead a little bit or I can pray and I'm not always thinking instantly like, oh, I have 20 seconds. Can I look at my phone? So that it just gives me a little bit more space. So I think my spirit is just more sensitive to that. I am less anxious and less angry than I used to be. And not just at things that you're looking at online, but also just the access to being online. If you have children and they play video games or they like to go online, the rage that comes over them. Like when you say, turn it off or you can't do that now. I felt that too, right? Of just like, oh, my kid is making it so I can't look at my phone right now. And you sort of feel that rush of this weird irrational anger. That is gone now. I had like a low level anxiety all the time. And that I wouldn't have connected to social media. But after I left, it was gone. And I talked to some other girls and said theirs was gone too. So I don't know what it is, but there is some sort of low level social anxiety that's causing pretty much all the time. And then another interesting thing, I was talking with another friend the other day who got off and she said, and I can see this in myself too, I am more bothered by sin than I used to be. I'm more bothered by, like, if I was watching a movie and I saw a violent scene or a sexual scene, when I was online all the time, that I was more desensitized to that. And I can tell since getting off that sin bothers me more than it used to, which is interesting. She said, I feel more innocent again. She said, like, yeah, you sort of do. You sort of feel more innocent. So that's the first thing. Secondly, physically, I sleep better. I go to bed. Like I can fall asleep faster. I wake up feeling more refreshed. I have more energy throughout the day. I have lots and lots more energy just for stuff to do around the house or to think about my work. My brain has more energy because I don't think it's actually my body having more energy. It's not like being online takes a lot of physical strength. I think it might just be like a mental energy. I don't know.
It's almost like, I don't know if this is right, but it's when you're on, there's a weight that you're carrying around maybe, and you just kind of feel that weightiness and maybe that's away now. And so there's some energy that comes with that. I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely rings true to me. Like you're sort of carrying carrying that all the time, which brings me to like the mental part of it. I don't know if you ever read David Allen's Getting Things Done, but one image he uses even in productivity is like to close the loop, like to write something down. You don't have to carry it open in your mind all the time. Social media is a loop you can never close. You're never done with it. You can always post something else. You can, as soon as you get off, someone else has posted something. You can never actually be caught up with social media. And so that, for people who like to get done with things and move on to the next thing and not always have that open program running in the back of your mind all the time, that was a big relief to me to be able to close that finally. Mm-hmm. I just think I think more clearly. Things in my life run better because like I was mentioning before, that margin, but I can think. So for example, before, like if my kids were coming home from school and I had 5 minutes, I would look at my phone and my kids would be all of a sudden, and I would be irritated because I wanted to be looking at my phone. Mm-hmm. Now I can think, oh, my kids are coming home in 5 minutes. What could I do? I guess you know what? I can make a thing of lemonade in 5 minutes. And so rather than them coming home and me being irritated and on the phone and me irritated with them, they're coming home and I'm like, hey, look, I made some lemonade. How's your day? Like, they're more interesting to me. My life is more interesting to me. It's like we've got this little bit of space, even though it doesn't have to be very much, just to think through the next thing, or to remember, what do I need to take with me to that? Or like all the little bits of your day that you have to be thinking all along the way, I have back. And so I feel like my life is running more smoothly. I feel like a more capable person. Mm. And then finally, socially, I think it has changed me. I can ask better questions. We were talking about this a little bit last time, John, but when I first got off of social media, I was missing a lot because everybody was on Facebook. And so if there was a wedding announcement or there was a birth announcement, Facebook was the place that you went to do it. And then you assumed everyone in your life had seen it. And so when people got together, they started talking to each other almost mid-conversation. Like, oh, you went to the mountains. Like, I saw your pictures. Oh, wasn't that a funny thing? Like, they already knew part of each other's stories. Mm-hmm. And I was missing that. When I first got up, I would be standing there thinking, I don't know, we're in the middle of a conversation. I don't know the beginning of it. But in the last couple of years, that has changed. And I think it's because social media has changed. So Facebook is not the only platform now. In fact, if you're a younger generation, Facebook is obsolete. There's so many different platforms you can be on. And because the algorithms have changed, so Facebook and Instagram and et cetera are not showing you what your friends are posting so much as they're showing you advertisements or what the influencers are posting. And maybe if you have a friend's post that's doing really well, they'll show you that as well. But that means that the people in my real life don't start with each other mid-conversation anymore. When I get to church or I get with my friend group and then they say like, oh, I went to the mountains the other week, then everybody there is like, oh, you did? Tell us about that. And so I feel like I'm right back in the conversation with them. And I can ask questions like, I'm just more interested in who they are. I can, when your relationship with someone is online, my friend said to me, man, like when I see my aunt post something and I see that she's having a good day or something, I assume all is well with her. But if I was talking to her in real life and I hadn't seen that before, I would just ask the question, like, is everything going well with you? How are you doing? Like, what are all, like, she said, there is an assumption if you see someone posting on Facebook that they're doing okay and that you know how they're doing, when neither one of those things might be true.
She felt more focused. She felt a change in her spiritual life, less anxious, less angry, more bothered by sin, less desensitized to it. Her kids were more interesting. She felt that she was able to focus. These are just a few ways in which Sarah has seen her humanity restored through the removal of social media. Sure, this might not always be the case for everyone, but maybe it would do the same for you. Perhaps it would for your own children. Tech realist Samuel D. James examines the connection between patterns in technology and human desires. Everyone longs for a glimpse of heaven, and James argues they are just looking for it in the wrong place, the internet. In his book, Digital Liturgies, Rediscovering Christian Wisdom in an Online Age, He discusses 5 digital liturgies that prohibit people from contemplating big truths, accepting the uncomfortable, and acknowledging God as their creator. It then calls the reader to live faithfully before Christ, finding wisdom through Scripture and rest in God's perfect design. Study questions for each chapter are included and can be used as prompts for reflection alone or in a small group setting. Pick up a copy of Digital Liturgies wherever books are sold, or visit crossway.org/plus to find out how you can get a 30% off discount with a free Crossway Plus account. We want to thank Crossway for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. You'll also find a link in the show notes for Digital Liturgies, Rediscovering Christian Wisdom in an Online Age. I know there are many who listen to this podcast and agree with the struggles associated with social media. You agree that it robs you of your humanity. Some of your professions, some of the callings the Lord has placed on your life call you to use social media. Some of the schools you're a part of almost require it. Many pastors feel a need to be on social media to know the world their congregants live in. Jen felt like this as a writer. As someone who has published, I often feel some of what she's describing. Whether or not you ever publish anything, listen to some of the wrestlings that she shares and see if they resonate with you in your own sphere of life.
Well, I think this is really important. And I think the way that I want to approach it is I want your listeners to think about the people whose books they're reading that they're really appreciating, and to know that it's really important to support authors, because if you don't buy books, then authors are going to be out there, soliciting you more and more and more and more. Yeah, I think things have changed dramatically. I say that a lot to people, and I don't even think I have realized it until probably the last, I don't know, maybe 3 years. When I first started writing, 2010-ish, 2011. I was publishing before that for Moody Bible Institute. I was doing devotional writing for them. And then in 2011, I started to write for Christianity Today. And then my first book was published. Then I got my first book contract, and that was published in 2014. And, all of this is, there's Facebook. I mean, when I started my kind of first blog, I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm taking such a big step. I'm going to put it on Facebook. Facebook feels like, gosh, the good old Facebook days, when people were just sharing their blogs, and not conspiracy theories. But yeah, I think it just seems, I think there are a lot of different things going on. I mean, I think there's a democratization of, I guess, just, published writing. And in many ways, Postman's kind of talking about that too. Television is just one more kind of, it's just a new medium. And now more people are going to be able to enter into, allowing their voice, to kind of get heard. And that's what's happening with social media for writers. Is it's not just, you don't have to just traditionally publish. Now you can write a Substack. Now you can self-publish a book. And so it means it's a very, very crowded marketplace. And I think the temptation is to, I'll just get out there and I'll just yell louder or longer than the next guy, selling his wares on the cart. And I've actually I am asking myself actively the question of whether I will be able to continue to publish traditionally. Because I don't have energy for that. I don't have appetite for that. I don't have desire. And I don't think it's because I'm better than people who do choose to do that. I think part of it is I'm getting older. And I'm going to just speak very frankly as a woman. I'm a 50-year-old woman. Social media is a visual environment. How many people do you follow that have gray hair and wrinkles? I mean, truthfully, it's an environment that it rewards aesthetics, and I just don't that's another part for me. It's like, no, I'm not gonna I don't want to play that game, and I don't feel that that's good for my soul. I
Mm.
actually feel like now one of my our task as believers in Jesus Christ is to receive, we have lots of tasks to glorify God in the given seasons of our lives. I don't want to go out there and try to be younger than I am, different than I am. I don't like the consumerism, truthfully, of social media. I don't want to peddle products. I want to write. I want to speak. I want to learn. I want to teach. And I am now at a point where I feel like God's going to give me those opportunities, I think, because these are the gifts that He's given to me. There's so many things I can't do. I can't take a picture to save my life, which is half the reason I'm probably not on Instagram. Because I'm like, I don't want to spend time with that, truthfully. If I have extra time, I'm going to invest it in my writing. I'm going to invest it in my reading, in my study, in my prayer life. I'm not going to figure out what kind of filter I need for my face. You know what I mean? So I think, but I do believe as consumers of Christian books, I really want to say, like, what do we value and what do we reward? It's sad to me that there are really bad books that sell well. And I think one of the reasons that they sell well is because they scratch a self-help itch, maybe. I think because we're enamored by the aesthetics that are represented by that person or the celebrity status of that person. And I'd love for us, and this is a pastor's thing too. It's people who are in leadership who can say, who can help people, kind of curate some really good resources. And I also think that in order to buy books, we have to become readers. And I guess that's the other thing we should probably talk about is that, social media, the research is there. It's not hard to see that it's absolutely decimating our attention span, which is another reason why I don't want to be out there. I don't want to be out there. I don't want to be out there. I don't want to be out there following other people's things. I don't want to be out there seeing if other people are following my things. I would rather be reading a book. But you're talking to a writer here.
Brett McCracken was also one of these who felt the need to be on social media. He felt that his work with the Gospel Coalition required it. Even though he's removed much social media from his life, he said that he once was an over-informed news junkie, his words. Hear him share a bit about this.
Yeah, I think maybe 5 to 10 years ago or more, I was definitely on social media a lot more than I am now. And I was, even like politics, I was a lot more passionate and I would share my opinions on social media a lot more. And I was kind of doing this thing where I was spending more of my energy using the megaphone of social media or blogs or whatever to kind of speak to the masses online, the faceless, disembodied masses who I never actually I'll never know them and they'll never know me. And I don't know when it occurred, maybe around the time I wrote my book Uncomfortable, which was that book really narrates personal journey for me with the local church where for the first time in a long time, I recognized the formative power of the local church for me. And I started, that was a turning point for me where I started to see that even if my local church community is more uncomfortable because I can't be behind an avatar, right? I'm not just getting likes when I say things. I sometimes get blank stares from the person I'm talking to in the church vestibule. It's more uncomfortable, and it's not as easy as it is online to just find your people who agree with you on everything. Your tribe in a church. It's hard because you have a mix of people, and it isn't about just you being in an echo chamber and kind of finding people who nod along with everything you say, which is what you can do on social media. So I think maybe 2017-ish when I wrote Uncomfortable, And then especially when I started writing the Wisdom Pyramid, and I tried to live what I was writing in the Wisdom Pyramid in terms of consuming much less social media, kind of online media, and nourishing my soul a lot more with the kind of embodied realities of local church, nature, time with real people over coffee, etc. So yeah, I think that I've gone on that journey myself, and I've seen my spiritual life just become so much stronger, and my overall mental health and, maturity and all those things. It's really gotten so much better in correlation to putting digital media just in its place a bit more in my life. And I'm still on social media, from time to time, but much less than I was before. And a lot of times I feel like I have to be there for my job and for what I do. And as an author, you kind of, publishers expect you to be on social media. And so part of the reason I'm still doing it a little bit is for that reason. I think there's genuinely good reasons to just share things and hopefully bless people with sharing positive things on social media. So with what I do in terms of time spent on social media, I try not to just like rant and rave and, add to the noise, but I try to point people to a playlist that I made or something, something that'll actually, like a new movie that I recommend, things like that.
I'm grateful anytime someone is vulnerable enough to share their struggles. So I don't take it lightly that Brett is willing to share that with me and those of you who are listening. As I've said before, his struggle is our struggle. Many of us are those overinformed news junkies, but it's not always just news from around the world, but the news of people's private lives that we feed off of, as well as the private aspect of our own lives that we share. Moments that might not ever need to be public. Moments that a select few friends should share. Moments that husbands and wives alone should share. Moments that families should keep to themselves without the need to perform. As Jen said, we can barely live our lives. How can we perform them for others? Life in a broken world is hard enough. How can we live stream it for the world? Before we close this out, listen to Jen share an important call for Christians. The Bible calls us to let our light shine, but it also calls us to a secret life of righteousness. A life where our left hand doesn't know what our right hand is doing. Contrast that with the public nature of social media.
So when I think about righteousness or when I think about wisdom, I have to think about process and time and failure that's embedded in that. I mean, nobody grows a life of wisdom without correction, without mistakes and failures and not even just, sins and failures, but just immaturity. I mean, that's one of the things I've thought a lot about as being a parent is that, man, I wish I had all the wisdom that I needed when I started, but that's just not the way that wisdom works. Wisdom works that you grow it kind of as you go and as you seek the Lord and he teaches you as you go. You just don't get it downloaded in a zip file in your brain when you start out. And so there's a way in which, like, if we are out on social media, like if everything is visible, then I do. It's not, can I grow in that environment? Can I grow when it's just, people sort of assume that people are coming to me for answers for what I already know? This is one of the things that I've really thought more recently about as a writer. I've noticed that I talk too much. I'm probably talking too much now.
No, it's
but when
great.
when you get into context and people are like, yeah, tell me what you think about this. And, you get to sort of pontificate and that becomes part of the work that you do every day. You're then not honing your listening skills. And I've just thought a lot about some of the just inherent temptations for any kind of like visible public life. A, I know it all. B, I talk all the time. C, I take up all the space in the room. Whatever. D, I think I'm the most interesting person. None of that feels like the the stance of or the orientation of righteousness to me, where righteousness is so much about, you know, following the one who did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but made himself nothing.
Mm.
And so I feel like there's this like, you know, you see the movement of Jesus, you know, and it's just like to the margins, you know, to the wilderness to pray, you know, ultimately to the cross. And to me, it just feels like social media just doesn't reward any of that. You know, social media rewards people who self-promote. And I am not judging people who wonderful if you've built an amazing social media platform that hasn't involved that. I think it's hard. You know?
Jesus went to the margins, as Jen said. He went to the wilderness to pray. He took on flesh and became nothing to save us. Yes, Jesus became a celebrity, but I think it's safe to say that wasn't what he was seeking. Celebrity wasn't his focus. What about you? You've been listening to Digital Christianity by Reformed Youth Ministries. For more information about our summer conferences, youth leader training, and resources, visit rym.org. If you would take the time to leave a positive review and share this podcast with others, it's one small way to help our ministry. Stay tuned to the RYM podcast for more great content that seeks to serve the church in her efforts to reach and equip youth for Christ.